Warning, this episode contains graphic language, depictions of horny dragons, drunk dwarves, grand theft barge, and as always, de-angst. Also, there will be spoilers for chapter 40 through 45 of Eldest, book 2 of the Inherent Cycle by Christopher Paolini. Listen at your own risk.
Is this a podcast, or is this just fantasy? We're just two nerds and we love our fantasy. So join us if you want to nerd out. Time to start the podcast and see. Anyway, here's the show.
Hello, readers. I'm Dane Patterson, the host who definitely would be a menace with the ability to talk to anyone I wanted at any time with just my head. So many annoyed people, Jacqui. Could you imagine?
I mean, sitting here in this room with you for so many hours a day, I think I kind of can. And I'm Jacqui Lanier, and is this a podcast or is this just fantasy? The podcast where we'd also probably do some lightly indiscriminate murder for the opportunity to be pirates. I mean, pirates, right?
Yo-ho! If you'd like to support us on Patreon, there's a link in our show.
Oh, no.
And if you can or just don't want to, we totally understand and just ask that you please rate us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts.
Yes, and you can also find us outside of your preferred podcast streamer. I mean, not like in the real world, just other places on the internet.
Oh, okay.
We have a website, isthisjustfantasypod.com, where you can find pictures from a very goofy photo shoot we did and also buy some sweet merch that we wore in said photo shoot so we could all match. It might be fun.
It was fun.
It was fun. Okay. I'm not going to lie, Dane. Last episode's section of chapters was kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
There was a lot happening.
Yeah.
But we finally got our first Niswada POV chapters.
Which was dope.
It was great. So I want to go over what we covered the last time before we get into what everyone's up to on this episode.
All right, let's do it.
Okay. We started with Aragon and Saphira taking an after-school field trip around Ellesmere with Arya as their chaperone.
Nice.
She's finally looking relaxed for the first time in a book and a half.
Yeah.
And as they walk the streets observing the elves engaged in various arts and amusements, she explains that elves are essentially the Nepo babies of all the races because they don't have to work or farm or hunt and can spend all of their time on their passion projects.
And everyone loves Nepo babies.
Yes, famously Nepo baby positive podcast here. So they pay a visit to the ancient even for an elf, and grumpy Master Smith. And Aragon learns that she was the one who forged Zarok and that there are only 4 other swords of her craft in existence right now.
Wow.
Yes. Arya also tells Aragon about the big rager on the calendar coming up, the Blood Oath celebration, and takes him to the Manoa tree, and it's a really big tree. No other knows.
Yeah, it's just big.
I guess it has a tragic and interesting backstory, and the elves basically worship it.
But they're atheists.
Yes, but they're atheists. And for once, Aragon and Arya end an interaction on a somewhat positive note, and that's shocking stuff for
I'm sure that will
series.
last for a long time.
Yes. From there, we finally get into Niswada's story. It's a bit of a slow start for her since she's mostly spending her time resolving chicken-related disputes and schmoozing Orin, the highly eccentric king of Serta. But she has a brilliant idea wherein one of her dresses is destroyed. She realizes there's always money in the lace stand. She sets Triana and the rest of Duvrangargata to using magic to make lace to sell to the citizens of the Empire.
Smart.
And then her plot takes a bit of a turn.
Yeah, it gets weird quick.
She's summoned by Angela and Solumbum to visit the child Aragon had blessed in Farthendur. Instead of being a baby just months old.
Farthendur.
Farthendur. Oh my God.
I'm sorry.
Instead of being a baby just months old, the child is the size of a toddler with basically a full adult intelligence level. Very creepy. And Niswada sees the consequences of our bean farmer's bad grammar firsthand. The child, named Elva, can immediately sense a person's deepest hurts, physical, emotional, past, future, everything that's ever bothered you or is going to bother you. She knows it innately. and she's compelled to help anybody, no matter the cost to herself. She's dark and she's creepy, but she wants to see Niswada because she wants to offer her services to the Varden's leader to help end the war before all the death and suffering drive her insane. Read a fun YA book, they said. It'll be fun, they said.
Just some light reading.
Ugh. Very creepy. Then we cut back to Eragon and Elismira for a marathon of fits. Fits on fits on fits.
He has a lot of them.
He has a lot of them. Eragon's back flares up in his room during a wild storm. Then Oramus suffers a mental attack of his own during training the next day. And Eragon apparently got fit FOMO because he drops down into another fit of his own after Oramus's. But everybody recovers reasonably well, and Oramus wants to press on with training for the day despite Eragon's just foul mood. And after Eragon's botched stump time session, Oramus decides the only thing to snap his student out of a funk is to go full debate me loser on his ass. Oramus and Eragon get into it about the mental focus of the riders' training before wrapping up with Eragon's reasons for resisting the Empire. And as we close to the section, Oramus intentionally provokes Eragon on the topic of old gal before being like, I'm glad you're mad. Come back and do better tomorrow. Will he do better tomorrow, Dane?
I mean, he's Eragon. As much crap as we give this bean farmer, he'll probably do better tomorrow.
He usually does better tomorrow.
Yeah,
That's
he's a good.
true.
I will give him this. He's a good student.
Yeah, I think he really does try his best. Even when he's in a shitty mood, he still is out here just watching them ants and not picking up a single lesson from his observation.
Sometimes it's funny because it's like, come on, man.
You can do it.
You can do it. You do so good and then you do so bad and it's so confusing.
I think more ants might await us in the future. But what kind of vibe did you get reading this episode section?
Honestly, I kind of feel bad for Eragon in this. It seems like his stuff is flaring up more and more as we've continued to read. And I just wonder, do you think you continue to train and work as hard as he's working if you were going through like mental and physical anguish several times a day?
That's a really good question. I guess with the stakes on Eragon being what they are, it's kind of hard to justify giving up. Also, as a person, I'm kind of fully dissociated from my body sometimes.
Okay, that sounds healthy.
So I don't know how much I would notice. I'd be like, I think there's a twinge back there, and sometimes I pass out, but I think it's fine.
Oh my God.
If the job's got to get done, the job's getting done.
Well, we need to move on to the chapter summaries. We're going to start with chapter 40. You should see a doctor, Jacqui. Chapter 40, Black Morning Glory. We're going to start this week off with a huge chapter. It's actually pretty big.
Yeah.
Eragon and Oramus spend lots of time studying the ancient language through reading and writing. Oramus gives Eragon homework, including histories and dictionaries.
Aww.
It was actually really funny when he gives him the dictionary. He's like, he misses a word and then he just like throws him a dictionary. He's like, you need to read,
Literally
dummy.
throws the book at him to get him to learn.
It's pretty great.
It's a little Brahm for me. It's giving, this is the letter A, learn it.
Of course, I was like, yeah, I like that.
Oh my God, yeah.
Oramus seems unwell here, the way he is described, but good old Kevin doesn't see it that way. He asks about Gramarye, and finally, Oramus relents and gives a lesson. Oramus asks Eragon what magic is.
Yes.
And we learn here, before I go any further into that, Brahm had to teach Eragon what you need to know to survive. It was a bit crude, and it was the bare bones. He skipped a lot of steps. He jumped to the middle kind of thing. Oramus likewise will need to skip things for time, but he's going to teach Eragon the finer points. So he's starting at the beginning, like asking beginning questions. And the secret of the ancient dragon riders, the information only they possess, he gives us some clues.
Okay.
So here's some of the things that he's going to teach once Eragon understands the finer points.
Okay.
How to kill with no more energy than moving a finger. How to transport an object from one item to another, which Arya did, so
I mean,
maybe she knew secret stuff. I don't know. A spell that will check for poison in food or drink. A variation on scrying that will allow you to hear as well as see.
Ooh.
How to draw energy from your surroundings and save like your own.
Interesting.
Which opens up a whole bunch of questions I have.
Yeah.
How to maximize his strength in every possible way. I guess making yourself stronger. And
Be important if you need to fight against Galbatorix.
Yeah, I'm imagining he's like mega strong, right?
Yes.
So he's just working out every day.
I mean, they do describe him as getting constantly stronger, like day over day, year over year.
What do you think that is? What's your guess now?
I mean, I really think he probably is like a devoted, speaking of Nepo babies, I think he's probably a devoted Goop follower. I think his diet's just really clean, Dane, and he's
Gwyneth
able.
Paltrow was a part of this.
I knew she was onto something, you know? I think it's a lot of broth and IVs.
Oh my God. His body's just so, oh my God,
His
a temple.
body's a temple,
His body's a
Dane.
temple. These secrets were normally reserved for the most wisest and well-trained of the Dragon Riders, and now they're going to Kevin.
Great. The bean farmer is going to really nail it, I think. I
Yeah.
think stump time's really going to come in handy.
What's funny is they directly pivot from this to playing catch with water balls.
Oh, he gets to play catch with his magic daddy?
Yeah. The water ball, so funny. Aragon gets frustrated and asks for like harder work, and Oramus traps him with air.
Like while they're fighting with the water balls?
Yeah, like right afterwards. He's like, okay, try to stop, try to break out of this. And Aragon pulls a Kevin and like speaks an absolute language to freeze his legs, and it puts him in direct conflict. And Oramus like would have killed Aragon if Oramus didn't just give up so that Aragon didn't die. He teaches, so Aragon's already Aragoning all over the place.
Yeah, he tends to do that.
Yeah. He teaches Aragon to never speak in absolutes, which finally, I feel like this should have been Brahm's first lesson, to be honest.
I mean, I think Brahm tried. I think the first, 12 ass rippings Aragon got during Brahm's instruction were all about not to exceed your strength. He didn't necessarily explain this side of it to him, but he really tried, I think, with everything he had to get Aragon to understand you don't want to end up in a used too much magic coma. Those are not a good place to be.
It's not great. You could die.
Yeah.
So only speak in things you can turn down, release, turn up. Speak to create a process is what Oramus sets up. So that's actually cool. I'm glad we do that.
Yeah.
Oramus traps him again, and we see his magic sickness that until this point really haven't been present except that one time. Aragon's about to try and get out when he feels the pressure on his legs slowly releasing. And he sees Oramus like really straining, trying to keep the magic going. But ultimately, Oramus stops again, and he like walks away breathless and like weak. And Aragon goes to him and bows in the fashion of the dwarves. And Aragon waits while Oramus just sits there. And it seems like it's a long time.
Yes, yeah. It kind of reminds me of when they started their lessons, and it was just like test of patience.
Yes.
Who speaks first?
I think Oramus is really sad, and I think they're the only two people in the world, actually, well, that they know, who have such great power and opportunity and are both like stifled.
Yes,
and so
yeah, that's a good point.
they kind of sit with it together. It's kind of nice, kind of sad. So anyway, he tells Aragon they'll begin again tomorrow. And Oramus then makes Aragon only speak in the ancient language.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Full Duolingo. He's put Aragon on Duolingo.
Yeah, he did. He put him on Duolingo.
Dual language immersion is the joke I was trying to make.
Oh, was it?
But Duolingo also works, so
Okay.
I'm sticking with it.
Sponsor us, Duolingo. Also, Oramus tells Aragon that his sword practice will start in the morning 1 hour before he normally comes. So he's now waking up 2 hours before dawn.
Ick.
Yeah. He will train with another elf as Oramus thinks that Aragon has nothing to learn. He just needs to practice as often as possible. He thinks it's going to be good for him to also meet other students and other people.
Yeah.
This is super interesting. Oramus says that like he's not representative of his race. Is he talking about not being crazy and arrogant, Jacqui? Like, what is he talking about?
It definitely could be. He definitely seems different, much more zen than a lot of the elves we've met. I think he's like maybe kind of, to me at least the way I read him, is almost like the embodiment of what the elves are described to be.
Yeah.
So it's like that placidness, that level-headedness that the elves are perceived to have, but then everybody kind of talks shit behind their backs, being like they're actually volatile as hell. So like
pretty crazy.
Be concerned. Oramus is the actual like
Gotcha.
Zen
He's the
master.
goal.
He's the guy. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. So Saphira bites Glader's tail as Aragon and Saphira are about to leave for the day. And Glader is very unimpressed and snaps and roars back at her.
I mean, yeah, it hurt.
Yeah, he's like super pissed. Saphira seems happy though, that Glader seems annoyed over it. And Aragon like asks why they're flying away. Like, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
And she says, she's just playing. And Aaron gives her a talking to. He's like, look, like you can't do this. It's a classic married couple situation.
Well, also just like chastising the other person for the thing that you do all of the time.
Yes, he's basically like, hey, don't do that. She's old and he's old and he doesn't like want you. It's kind of funny.
Yes, you're embarrassing yourself. And we're like, yes, Aragon.
Well,
that is correct.
Well, look what happens next. Arya arrives again to show Aragon the palace and the gardens.
Yeah, and I bet he takes his own advice, right, Dane? Like, that's something like an evolving, wise dragon rider would do.
I think Aragon's feeling a little playful himself here.
Oh, Uh-oh.
Yeah. The gardens do sound very interesting. There's a huge variety of plants and flowers, as well as elves in various states of chilling. Aragon, that sly dog, he asks what flower is Arya's favorite. It's the black morning glory.
She's so emo.
I know.
I cannot believe you don't like her more.
I mean, if she was just like, I just need like one piece of niceness and I like her. It's so sad because I want to. She's so cool. He then says that Arya is beautiful when she's talking about the beautiful flower. And oddly, she seems okay with it at first. And Saphira is practically scandalized.
I know. She's like, dude.
Yeah. But really, Arya is clearly not okay with it.
Oh.
She starts to tell Aragon that Phaelin, which was one of the 2 elves that died in that prologue of the first book, was someone she was in love with.
She has an ex.
Yes, and he put the black morning glory in this like special place for Arya. And Aragon doesn't handle that well.
You're kidding.
He asks to be excused, and he's super embarrassed, and he's super mad.
I did read this as very funny when I just think for whatever reason, like he's supposed to be a man, asking to be excused is a very weird vibe for like, if he's trying to prove the point they're 2 peers, like it's not going well, my guy. He's like, you've got an ex? Can I be excused?
Yeah, well, then it's funny
because
like
crying and running away.
Well, because then he stops when he gets to the door and he turns around and is like, tomorrow can we hang? And she's like, no, I think I'll be busy.
Good. Yes.
And then Saphira tells him it's rich of him to get mad at her.
Yes,
but he's going to immediately do it. Yeah.
Yes, the women in this chapter have got it together,
yes.
we'll say.
So Aragon and Saphira are about to go to bed when someone enters their treehouse. It's Orik.
Yes.
And this is... I always laugh. I love this part. I love the way the narrator reads it in the audiobook. Orik has fallen down and is clearly extremely drunk. He's very jolly. He's like saying like, you've abandoned me. Like,
I know. He's like, look at what you did. You left me here with all these assholes.
Yeah, he's like,
all these weird atheists.
yeah, he's like, these people suck. So Orik has been drinking fell nerve and his special, it like makes his like his tongue, like he can speak more eloquently.
Yeah.
It's like a side effect. I really enjoyed it.
The opposite of normal drinking.
I know, it's so fun. He's loquacious, I think he says. Orik explains that he's drunk because he's been stuck with elves.
Yes.
And the elves won't really hang out with him, it sounds like, or talk with him. And he can't spend time crafting as the elves are all masters of everything. He's like, what the fuck would I make? No one would buy it, you know? So he feels pretty useless. He's pretty bored. And the boys are catching up. And since Aragon is starting to drink with him, he starts to talk about his attraction and recent attempts at flirting with Arya. And Orik's like, dude, no.
Don't do it, bro.
But then he changes. And he's like, well, you know what? Who am I to say back off?
No, Orik. Don't do it, Orik.
Then Orik then explains that he's supposed to be married to his lady friend. We get an answer to our question earlier.
Okay, so he's not married. He doesn't have kids.
No, he has a special lady, and he was supposed to get married. But the Urgle is attacked, and he was sent to the elves. And he sounds really smitten.
Oh, that's so he likes her. It's not like an arranged marriage.
He talks about her. It's so nice.
That's really cute.
Yeah, Orik gets better and better as these books go on. It's so wonderful.
Love Orik.
Then chapter ends with Orik talking about how giants exist. And it's really funny how he does this because he's like, he sets it up that you're like, no, they can't possibly. And he starts asking about them and describing them. And then he starts laughing and it's like humans and elves. It's human and elves. And then he falls off his chair. Aragon puts him in bed and they go to sleep.
I like 2 bros partying. That's a good chapter.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I had to add it in the summary because it's just like, it's so great.
Yeah, Orik is a real one. We love Orik.
So I'm sure we're going to have like a nice, fun chapter now. So what do we do next?
Well, that takes us to chapter 41, very positively, happily titled, The Nature of Evil, Dane.
Oh, no.
This chapter opens, it's not as, well, not quite as melodramatic
Oh, no.
as the title
Yeah, okay, let's see.
suggests. So this chapter opens with Aragon waking to discover that his nighttime visitor must have slipped out while he was asleep. And like, I totally get you, man. Been there. He didn't even leave a note. It's rude.
Grabbed his little dwarf boots and tiptoed out of there.
Walk ashamed home. But Aragon is in rough shape after 2 days of back spasms and sparring with Oramus.
Wait, do you think Orik left like a sweater or something so he can come back later.
Yes, a spray of cologne. But yeah, Aragon's in pretty rough shape after 2 straight days of back spasms and sparring with Oramus, and he has to get his ass out to the practice yard to work on sparring with just random new elf.
Yeah.
His partner arrives, and he's a haughty elf named Vanir.
Yeah.
Aragon is nervous about how bad he's going to be compared to the elves, also about his back, which is not doing well. And Vanir, as they start sparring, quickly lands just like 4 touches on Aragon and disarms him. The fight is like classic sticks and stones may break my bones, but your words will haunt me forever, because they're kind of like verbally bandying words as they spar. And after the first bout, Vanir insults the entire human race, calls Aragon a coward, and insinuates that Saphira was insane when she chose Aragon over any elf, the lowliest elf. Sick burns, Vanir.
I mean, we have questioned the same thing, so he's not crazy.
So Aragon flies into a rage.
Great.
Naturally.
Yeah.
And this actually enables him to beat Vanir back quite a bit and land a touch on him.
Okay.
So currently we're 4 touches and a disarm to 1 touch that takes all of Aragon's insane
skill,
just insanity, basically. And then he suffers an explosive seizure before he can do any more winning.
Poor guy.
I know. I do think that puts you firmly in losing official head trauma tally.
So I have to catapult you when you die? Is that what happens?
Said you are not allowed to participate in planning my funeral. You may attend.
Planned your funeral. I got it.
You may not do that. So Aragon suffers this explosive seizure, one of the worst ones yet.
Okay.
And when he finally comes around, Vanir tries to end the training session, but Aragon is determined to disprove his haters, basically, and insists on fighting for the entire assigned hour. There's a bunch of like elves kind of standing around and jeering. It seems like Vanir maybe has a little crew with him. When the hour is up, Saphira confronts Vanir directly.
Okay.
And the whole time Vanir's like landing blows on Aragon, he keeps saying like, dead, blow, dead, blow, dead.
So annoying.
I kind of like it. I'm not going to lie. It reminds me a little bit of like Game of Thrones and Arya's like sword master.
Okay, that makes sense.
Like dead girl. It's kind of how I read it. So Saphira comes up to Vanir, like stares at him very intensely. She just touches him like barely with her snout and she goes, dead.
Nice.
And speaks to the crowd. It's great.
She's the best.
Yes, the sass is out of control. And Aragon and Saphira end up flying out to the crags after that. So after morning yoga with Oramus, kind of recovery yoga, I think a little less hot yoga, more recovery yin, you know. Aragon's meditation ants execute a brutal raid on some neighboring ants during stump time today.
So cool.
Yes, I did like this. This is kind of, I think, maybe like your spider thing. Yes. Yeah. And as they're executing this raid, that finally Aragon's kind of making a connection after stump time. He finally is crystallizing why he wants to resist Galbatorix. So this is his like values thing from the last episode carrying over. And he goes back to Oramus to give him the answer that although he knows war will cause suffering, Galbatorix has already caused more suffering than the war is going to. And he's going to continue to cause exponentially more than that because he's immortal. Yeah. And unless somebody stops him, there's no limit. The limit does not exist on what.
There's no end to this.
Yes, exactly.
Gotcha.
So that was kind of their first like conversation about this. Aragon was like, well, Galbatorix is bad and he hurts people. And Oramis's response, of course, was, well, war is going to hurt people.
Right.
What say ye to that, Aragon? And Aragon's like, oh.
Touche.
And that's when Oramus was like, come back tomorrow, just like be better. And so he came back and now he has a better answer.
Aragon does do his homework.
Yes, I will say that. And then he adds to that, that no matter what else is going on, Galbatorix needs to pay the price essentially for genociding the race of dragons.
Yeah, it's not nice.
No, it's not great. And also that, you know, that they need to be able to rescue the remaining eggs from Galbatorix. So like those 2 points alone, even aside from all the human elf dwarf suffering, he should answer for genocide and they should rescue potential dragons from him. And
100%.
Oramus seems very happy with his answer. So he did it. He got a gold star.
Yeah.
I'm proud.
From his elf daddy.
Yes, from his magic daddy. So they move on to like a who's who of evil Allegasia.
Okay.
Where Oramus just drills Aragon on who's evil and who's not. Kind of a fun, it's like one of your would you rathers.
Yeah, great.
So Galbatorix.
Hold on. I invented that game.
Yes.
So how is this in this book?
Oh, that is weird, isn't it?
So
Let me see if you
strange.
can answer this pop quiz
Okay.
on Aragon's behalf.
Here we go.
So who's evil, Dane? Galbatorix.
Yes.
Great. Durza. Huh?
Yes.
No.
No. Okay.
So surprisingly, Durza's a no because he himself, like as Karsabe, wasn't
that's right.
necessarily evil. He maybe did some magic with bad intentions, it seemed like,
It's
and like
revenge.
was possessed by evil spirits, which was the big problem there.
For
And then he did a
revenge.
bunch of evil shit. And yeah, revenge is never evil, Dane. Okay, next question.
Okay.
Urgles.
Yes.
That is what Aragon says,
Yeah.
but Oramus pushes back here, which I really like. He brings up to Aragon that the only thing Aragon knows of the Urgle race is seeing their soldiers in battle, essentially.
Right.
He knows nothing of their culture. Oramus brings up, like, have you heard their stories, seen their art? Have you ever seen one of their women or children? Like,
yeah. Do you know anything else other than they are?
then their warriors fight.
Yeah, fighters. Yeah.
Yes. And he points out too that when Aragon talks about the Urgles, because Aragon really sticks to his guns in this conversation, which is interesting. He's
Yeah.
like, it doesn't matter. They'd kill us no matter what. We should wipe. He says like we should wipe every last Urgle off the face of Allegasia.
That's horrible. It's not good. But to his credit, he did experience Yazawak, right?
Yeah, the body mountain was
body mountain with
was
a baby
really
on the
tough
top.
look. Yeah, for sure. So
Yeah.
Aragon's like they would spare like no thought to murder all of us. We should definitely murder all of them before they get the chance. And Oramus still pushes back on Aragon, saying what he's essentially proposing is genocide.
Right.
How is that different from Galbatorix?
It's pretty Galbatorixy.
Yes, and Oramus ends this with a warning that Aragon may need to check his prejudices to work with the Urgles at some point, which
Totally.
is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
A bit of Chekhov's Urgles, the one with the cat. After their daily vocab and magic lessons, Oramus and Aragon discuss killing with magic and battle. We get some really good tidbits about this here. So we learn killing can be as easy as causing a stroke with a single artery. I think this is like
Crazy.
Oramus is like with no more energy than lifting a finger, basically. It's like, you kink the right blood vessel and
Done.
dead. Also, he points out that this means that armies, like large armies, exist essentially to protect magicians from other magicians, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Like, that's a lot of collateral damage there.
Yeah. He's talking essentially about a chess game in battle now.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly is how he's kind of describing it. He said that magicians in battle, like battle with armies, guard themselves and their soldiers from the enemy magicians is
Gotcha.
kind of the way this is working. So they set up wards. And when this conversation kind of turns to the rarity of magic users in the general population, because I think that plays a big part in why this dynamic exists. Oramus drops another tidbit saying that ancient oaths evidently mean that elves have more spellcasters than other races, but apparently all elves can't use magic.
Okay. So they can't.
I feel like we're flip-flopping a little bit, but that is like almost directly what Oramus says in this chapter. It's kind of implied that the ancient oaths might be the stuff to do with the dragons.
Yeah.
And that's why there are more magic users, but they can't all use magic.
All right.
So
We got to ask Christopher Paolini about this.
yes. So they move on here to wards, which I mentioned the magicians use to like protect their side's soldiers from enemy magicians. Those help for sure, but they use energy to work. So under attack from an army, it's probably not like the best choice to individually ward every soldier on your side. And this leads Aragon to question how Galbatorix's energy and strength keep increasing year over year. And Oramus says he has an answer to this, which is crazy.
That surprised me.
Yes, but he says Aragon's not ready to hear it.
Okay.
And Aragon mostly accepts this. I kind of would too. Oramus really seems like he's got his shit together. So you're just like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
We'll get there when we
He
get
seems
there.
nice. Like,
yes, he definitely seems like he I mean, I think Brahm for so long did not want to answer questions. So Aragorn was like, well, if I keep prodding, I'll get something out of him. Oramus is not like this. Oramus will answer pretty much anything. So if he's going to draw a line, you kind of respect that.
Yeah, it seems like he's doing it for nice reasons, not like he's annoyed.
Yeah, I would say so. So Aragorn also wonders here after this discussion of wards. He's like, well, shit, why didn't anybody tell me this before the battle at Faïrth-agraph? Which I was like, oh, right.
Yeah.
Like even adult me reading this again, I was like, oh, good question, Aragorn.
Every time I do the same thing, like, oh, that's right.
That's right. That's crazy that you weren't. Because I kind of forget that this is how we maybe arrive at this conclusion a little bit, or how we get some proof here. So Oramus seems really surprised that Aragorn wasn't warded. Like immediately he gets like a blank look on his face, and Aragorn's like, bud, teacher, where are you going? Hey,
this is what I'm saying. Can you imagine me with this power?
No. What Oramus was doing when he goes blank behind the eyes is radioing over to Arya and saying like, what was the deal with Aragorn? You were there at the battle. Why didn't you teach him about wards? Because she knows all of this. Yeah. And she says the twins reported to Ajahad that Aragorn would be able to ward himself and left him vulnerable. Intentionally, essentially. So after they did their magic test, remember, pentagram in the dirt, all of that.
How could I forget?
Yes. So after that, when they reported back on where his skill level was, they said, oh, he's all good on wards. He's got it. And it's like not really a word that he heard before this.
Was this after the Duvranger Garda conversation where he was like kind of mean to them?
I mean, maybe, but
because they threatened his life then.
That's true. And apparently they meant it. Yeah. But when Oramus is thinking this through, that coupled with the way the twins, like it could be viewed that they lured him into Trondheim.
Maybe.
When Durza popped up through the floor and all the rest of the enemy magicians left Aragorn alone during the battle, even though he was not warded. Yeah. Like all these suspicious things lead Oramus to conclude that the twins are the Vardens traitors.
I mean,
and it sucks that they're dead.
They were heroes in the battle, though.
Allegedly.
I'm just saying.
I don't know if that was on screen, Dane. I think they just said, oh, we totally killed a bunch of Urgles.
Oh, is that what that was?
I think so. I don't think we directly saw it necessarily.
Okay. Well, yeah, no, we definitely didn't.
Yeah. So
okay.
TBD, but it sucks. It doesn't really matter. They're dead. So definitely won't come up. The chapter wraps with Oramus teaching Aragorn 12 new kill words, which is fun. And Aragorn's like, oh, hell yeah, this will be perfect because revenge plot. And he's like flashing back to the Razak.
Yes,
which
finally.
Is crazy. He's like, this will help me just like murk those guys. Yeah. And Oramus, in response to this, drops a bunch of new Razak intel about why this actually might not work so well. Yeah. Because they're primeval and eldritch.
Awesome. Let's go to chapter 42, Image of Perfection. Oramus went to teach Aragorn how to make a Faïrth.
What?
A Faïrth. Look at this Faïrth-agraph. It's an image made on a slate.
The most perfect episode title.
I know. I love it so much.
I think this is going to have to be our last episode, unfortunately.
Yeah, we're so sorry, guys. We want to go out when we're peaking and look at this Faïrth-agraph is the best title.
That's the best it's going to get.
All right. An image made on a slate. This is what a Faïrth is. An image made on a slate full of pigments that make realistic images with magic.
Yes.
Faïrths are basically pictures because it requires you to picture in your mind. Wow. And then it makes a picture.
Wow.
Yeah. Its accuracy or artistry depends on your focus. Cool. So Oramus thinks it's an excellent exercise for Aragorn to practice focusing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
After practicing with nature scenes, he finds that his Faïrths are only half done, with specific details completely finished and others completely blurry or just not there at all.
Yeah.
And Oramus explains that like most humans have trouble making an image at first. Mm-hmm. And he also mentions that Aragorn's thinking is very interesting. And I love this because I think this is the coolest exercise to see how someone thinks. It really shows what we already know about Aragorn. He is focused. He does focus, but only on like the one thing that's interested in him.
Yeah.
And so we're seeing that. Everything else gets blurred.
That does make sense. I have a weird question that I'm kind of just thinking of now.
Okay.
Are there like different styles in Faïrths the way there are different styles in art? Like, can you do an impressionist Faïrth or like a cartoon style Faïrth, a pop art Faïrth?
Yeah, I actually get the impression that he's like implying that it can be as photorealistic as possible, or it can be as abstract as possible.
Yeah. Are we doing some like Picasso Faïrths, Salvador Dali Faïrths?
Ormus gets mad because it's just always Picasso's.
I mean, it'd be a good way to pass off like, that's just how I see it.
That's just how I see the world. Well, Aragon's about to do one, maybe a Picasso, and Orik and Arya crash the party.
Oh.
Yeah, Ormus is polite, but he's like, why are you interrupting me? And Orik tells Ormus that he has to see some of the training, or he cannot go back to his king daddy with an honest report.
That makes sense.
And Ormus basically says, it's top secret. You can't do this. You have to go. And Ormus pushes back. Orik pushes back on Ormus.
Yes.
And Ormus lets him stay for the Faïrth lesson.
I really like this.
Yeah.
And now Orik's going to have something to report to King Uncle Daddy.
Yeah. Let's see what that is. Aragon then goes to make another Faïrth. He's a little nervous now because people are watching.
He's got an audience.
And
he's got performance anxiety. Is that what you're trying to say, Dane?
Yeah. Let's just things get worse than that. Oh, Aragon, you're so predictable. He makes an intense and artistic rendition of Arya.
Yeah.
Is this creepy, Jax?
Yes, Dane. It's very, very, very creepy.
Okay, it feels yucky to me, but I just want you don't know.
I don't like it.
Okay, Ormus looks at it, and then he hands it to Arya.
I do love that Ormus is like, okay, bro.
He's like, I'm not dealing with that.
She deserves to know.
Yeah. Arya hurls it. And it's so funny because Orik's like, what? What was it? I didn't get to see it.
Yeah.
And also, I don't know. He's like, what did you do? Orik's like freaking out. So Ormus dismisses Orik. But Orik's like, bro, I just got here.
Yeah.
And Ormus is like, you can come back another time. We have to have a side chat. Aragon.
Sidebar.
Yeah, seriously. Aragon asks Ormus why Arya would be mad or fearful of what he made because Arya just turns and leaves. And
well, yeah.
And Ormus breaks it down.
I would also be very creeped out.
Me too, I think. Ormus breaks it down. More than anything, what he says amounts to like putting her in an uncomfortable position, this like flirtation, because he's a writer and because she's a princess and they're allies. Like, it's an impossible situation.
Yes.
She's already expressed that he's too young and like they have more important stuff to do.
Yes.
And so she cannot completely dismiss him.
Yes.
Because politically, that would be
a
rude.
disaster.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, I mean, he's kind here, and I really like Ormus.
Yeah.
You know, he isn't as fun or as warm as Brahm in a lot of ways, but he seems more stable and more consistent.
Yeah.
And he also seems to have a great amount of empathy for Aragon.
Yes.
This isn't done in a judging way. This is done in a almost like I'm sad for you kind of way.
Which is kind of worse. He's like, oh, bud.
He's like, bud.
Come on, let's sit down and talk about your bad crush and why you're making her life shitty by not being able to control yourself.
Let me put on some Nickelback and we'll just sit on the crags of telling whatever it is. And it ends with Aragon saying he'll apologize and that he'll stop his advances.
Yes, which is some growth from him. We'll see.
But that takes us to...
I've got doubts. That takes us to chapter 43, The Obliterator. The chapter starts with Aragon waking the next morning and determined to find Arya to apologize.
Yeah.
She's avoiding him and he throws himself into his lessons as a distraction. This has the fringe benefit of him finally making a ton of progress with Ormus, which is great. And particularly, I kind of liked this. It says, quote, he makes progress at spells that dealt with the great energies such as light, heat, and magnetism. He excelled, for he possessed the talent to judge nigh exactly how much strength a task required and whether it would exceed that of his body. That's his specific talent now? Like, if that's not growth, I don't know what is.
Well, I would say the argument is that like he's pushed that limit so many times that he knows exactly what it takes to make himself die.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So I do kind of I like the description of that type of magic with the great energies. That's all very interesting to me, and learning to manipulate that. I'm like, well, that's the coolest magic.
It's
what other kind
cool.
is there? So he learns to cast 2 spells at once in this
wild
runaway improvement on training. He he learns to infuse energies into matter, which is a cool way to like craft items. I think it's part of why Zarok is a magic sword.
Oh, okay.
It's part of what happened there. And he finally learns to cook.
Oh, good.
Thank God.
It really is college.
Yes. It's one of the things Oramus makes him do like absent-mindedly with like fire and heat and that kind of stuff. They also discuss here, which is kind of interesting, like the elves' body modifications that they do.
Yeah.
And because this is part of this like energies conversation. So it comes out that there are some elves who like want to resemble certain creatures or just generally be cuter.
Doesn't he say that's like why they're all hot? Because
Yeah,
like
kind of.
everyone looks exactly like they want
once
to.
you get to the age that like you can.
Okay, but this goes back to the magic thing.
They're all magic?
They're all, again, Oramus is essentially saying they're all magic.
This is just
It goes back and forth.
This is not just please write in anybody.
Yes, we would
Viewer,
really
if
like to
we're
know.
Stupid, please let us know. But
He does say that.
yeah,
Okay.
that is crazy.
Okay.
I think it must be kind of that like there's an innate access to a little bit of magic,
Okay.
things that maybe regard like nature, the sex magic, this bod mod magic, that kind of stuff.
They can be pretty, sex magic, nature.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Great. And then the rest of them need to have extra powers to do extra stuff.
Okay.
The other thing Oramus drops here is that gems, speaking of energies, like gems are the ideal vessels to store energy. So you can like plug some energy into a gem for a while. It can hang on to it for you and you can access that later. So
pretty
you can
cool.
carry around little batteries basically.
Yeah.
So aside from Aragon's lessons now, his new favorite pastime is reading, which we love. And he does take Oramus's advice and study up on Urgles and their culture, which is very cool. We get a lot of interesting information about that, as well as elves and their mating habits, which is creepy, Aragon. Stop it. We don't need to know.
I love that he's like kind of doing like a revenge arc here. He's like a revenge body. Yeah. You know, he's working like so hard.
Yes.
He's like, I don't need you anyway.
Yes.
And then, but like, he's also like, okay, but like, how do they do it?
How do they do that? Is it like the same as us?
Do they have like the same parts?
Oh, okay. So Saphira's training is also like chugging right along. She's practicing flight maneuvers and strength training, extended fire breathing, which is cool. She's trying to get up to like just being able to spout fire for like a half hour at a time.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yes. And then she actually is learning dragon history and lore, which is very cool. Sometimes Aragon and Saphira are switching teachers for the day. I just think that's cute.
It's so
it's
cool.
not important at all, but I
No.
like to think of like Oramus and Saphira flying around.
Yeah, I am bummed we don't get more of like Glader teaching Aragon.
Yes,
That would
yes.
be kind of cool.
Aragon is still sparring with Vanir every morning. He always is having at least one fit. So we are well and away. You've lost the shit out of that bet, Dane. He
I
has at
know.
least one fit per day. And Vanir and his like young little posse of elf friends, like young for elves, you kind of get the idea that there's like a new guard of elves in town.
Yeah.
And they're friends with Vanir. They all are like very Draco Malfoy to Aragon. That's definitely the vibe I'm getting. The barely veiled spite here is constant.
Yes.
But Vanir always manages to be like technically polite in these interactions, which is kind of infuriating. Finally, one of these days, Aragon draws Vanir into an argument. He just is like, fuck this guy. I'm going to talk so much shit to him. He's not going to have an option but to fight me.
Yeah.
Interesting strategy, Aragon, but do you? The elf's disdain for Aragon, it turns out, it boils down to the idea that someone so ill-equipped has the gifts, blessings, and power of the position of the only rider, like first new rider, when it should have been an elf. So like, this boils down to stuff like training privately with Oramus and staying. I think that he makes a big deal of like, you're walking in the footsteps of the first rider of Rail, like staying in his house, that kind of stuff.
Yes.
He's very upset about this. And he also makes the point, and this is where I'm like, ooh, he's maybe got a point.
Yeah.
He also says it was a human rider, Galbatorix, that threw the world into chaos in the first place. And it seems like all they have in Aragon is another weaker human rider to try to right that ship. So he's like, the weakness of your race is why we're all fucked in the first place. And now we have you to fix it, and you look like a piece of shit compared to Galbatorix.
Yes. And what's funny is I like Vanir, and I don't like Arya, or I haven't really enjoyed Queen Islanzadi. And the reason I like Vanir here is like, this is logical. It makes sense.
Yeah.
And he's acting exactly within, like, you know, I don't like him. He's mean to our protagonist, but I like him as a character.
Yeah.
Even though he's a bad guy, because this all makes sense to me. I can understand it a little bit.
Yeah, I think I can kind of see that. Saphira, who's like paying attention to all of this through their constant mind meld, is pissed.
Yes.
And she turns up the volume on her mental radio here because Eragon's like seeing red basically. And she's like, hey, my guy, I chose you for a reason. And I am like the great and all powerful dragon in this situation. So if I picked you, it's because you were the best person to be picked. And that's nice from her.
Very nice.
Yes. So Eragon, after this, Vanir actually storms off. After this, ends their lesson early. They do not complete the full hour of sparring. So Eragon shows up over to Ormus's. He gets to the crags a little early and has to explain why to Ormus, and tells his teacher about the whole fight, spills all the tea. Ormus is very unimpressed with Eragon for basically letting his anger get the best of him. He says that only is going to prove the haters right and could get him killed in battle. If he's not level-headed, if he cannot use his logic over his anger, like, might be bad.
I got the vibe that he was like, we're writers and we're better than that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Eragon asks how Vanir, as a part of this fight too, I think Eragon tried to lash out at him with magic.
Yeah, it didn't work.
No, so they're sword fighting, and Eragon's like, fine, I'll magic you to death. And Vanir just like swats aside the attempt from Eragon in a way that I remember being a little shocked when I read it the first time, being like, oh, we did not know he was also magic. And that's when Vanir really flies off the handle to be like, you don't know shit. Like, you don't know the half of what I know about sword fighting, magic, anything. And so Eragon asks how in that moment Vanir was able to cast magic without speaking, which is not necessarily something we saw except for when Islanzadi made it rain flowers when he first got there. And he's like, what's that? What's the deal with that?
It's funny because I was always wondering, like, did she hide like all the flowers up there? And she's like, one day this is going to come in super handy.
Yeah. No, she just like thinks about it, I guess. So Ormus says that Eragon's not necessarily ready to know how you cast magic without speaking, but the timeline makes it so that Ormus is going to have to tell him. So Ormus explains it's not the sounds of the words that trigger the spell, it's thinking them. He's like, what do you think, like the vibrations coming out your mouth or what makes magic happen? Like, think about it for 1 second, Eragon. Eragon's like, oh, that does make sense.
Oh, like, wow.
Yes, exactly. Ormus says it can be super dangerous because it's liable to be derailed by any stray thought. So that seems sketch. And it leads them to go over a little history of magic here. So Ormus explains that once upon a time, most ancient magic was all wild magic, which was much stronger than the magic they can access now, but completely unpredictable. So magicians were constantly like loosing calamities upon the land, which is wild. And gradually the control of language helped, basically, as like people and magicians had more language, they were able to control magic better. And it still wasn't foolproof though. And after a while, there was an accidental almost apocalypse, which was very, very bad. It prompted the Gray folk, who were one of the ancient races that were maybe kind of a precursor to elves. The Gray folk concentrated all their magicians to enchant magic itself to be controlled by their language, which is now the ancient language. So this was just their native tongue.
Yeah, just that sounds
the
light
native
and easy.
tongue of the Gray folk. They all banded together and they were like, we're just going to magic up magic. And the fate of the Gray folk is still a mystery, but it seems like the spell drained them of their strength and they all died off. Like there weren't any magicians in the Gray folk after that.
Oh, wow.
And dragons, so what Saphira is able to do and access is that wild magic.
Oh, that's cool.
So that's what still resides in the dragons, is that ancient and wild magic. And everybody else accesses the magic that has this enchantment on it to be controlled by the ancient language.
Another way in which the dragons are cooler than everybody else.
Yes, a bit. Cool. Just a touch, Dane. So it is really interesting as this same day continues to wear on, or as the days, in Ellesmere continue to wear on. Eragon continues dueling Vanir every morning and they just are like frosty. The vibes are very bad.
It's not great.
Yes, and he continues to go to his lessons every day out on the crags. His back is getting progressively worse day by day. Now the Rimgar, even his like restorative yin, is sending him into seizures, which is very bad. And that causes him to rename the pain the Obliterator in the way he thinks about it.
Did he write it in the sand?
I think so. Yeah, I think that's the only way he could have come up with it, is drawn with a stick in the sand. Classic coping mechanism. And honestly, I'm not going to lie, that's kind of a letdown after the chapter title in a book with magic. I was thinking the Obliterator, like we start getting history of magic, and I was like, oh my God, great. The Obliterator's a spell. Like the Obliterator is a creature. The Obliterator is his chronic pain. The chapter ends with Oramus giving Aragon an all-time great pep talk to not give up in the face of his agony after a particularly bad fit during the Rimgar. And I'm just going to quote Oramus here because our magic daddy says it better than anybody. He says, "We stand between the light and the dark and keep the balance between the two. Ignorance, fear, hate, these are our enemies. Deny them with all your might, Aragon, or we will surely fail."
Oh, wow, that's so nice.
I know.
And why that was all wonderful and it ended really great. We're going to transition from the wonderful forests
With our daddy
Warden.
Oramus.
We're going to have to pivot to the chaos. It's chapter 44.
Yes.
In Narda.
Yeah.
This chapter takes us back to Roran.
Woo.
We haven't seen him in like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I miss the strong hammer.
You would.
Yeah. And he definitely got a beard, which is nice.
Very cool.
It shows us that time has passed.
Yes, exactly.
The people of Carvajal have made it to Narda. They're looking rough. They're looking dirty, skinny, worn out, bundled up. And the people of Carvajal have seen better days.
Yes.
Even the children are skinny and not moving around much. It's bleak. Yeah, Roran seems to have established his leadership position now. He's firmly in charge. And people come for him for comfort, to offer him food, and talk about him. Like, they whisper about him, like, oh, it's the strong hammer.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool. The trip through the spine was rough. It was not good.
I will say, I do like that we get this only in flashback, that we did not have to slog through day by day with Roran. Thank you, Christopher Paolini. We appreciate that.
Yeah, it was nice to come back and be like, good, we're through that. Thank
Yes.
you. 3 older people died of cold.
Aw.
1 child broke an arm.
Oh.
1 child drowned.
Ooh.
And wolves and bears kept eating their livestock. That's why they're all hungry.
Oh.
Seems like the worst trip ever.
I mean, okay, I will say, given the way they talk about the spine, and given that their superstition of the spine is based on an army that lost a quarter of its soldiers, half of its soldiers in the mountain range, inexplicably, without
disappeared.
cause of death.
Yeah.
I think they're doing pretty good. I think Roran's a magician, to be honest.
Yeah, Roran did a great job.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there was like no Donner Party like problems.
That we're aware of.
Well,
Chris doesn't give it to us in the flashback, thank God.
That is true. 3 older people did just die of cold. Quotations in the air.
I mean, the Donner Party died of cold. It was what happened to him after that's the problem.
I'm winking at you
God,
right now. You're following along. Okay, Roran seems to take a leadership, like I mentioned, and he's embracing it so he can save his love.
Yeah.
Katrina.
Yes.
Yeah, being in charge gives him the ability to go after her, and he's going to make sure that they're moving in the right direction. So Roran and some of the villagers, Horst, Baldur, and Loring's 3 sons, which we don't get their names, just the Loring gang.
Yeah, the Lorings.
Yeah, Tweedledee, Tweedledum, and like 1. Go to Narda at dawn. They sneak until they get to the road on the other side, and then they walk to the gate like they're traveling, you know?
Yeah.
And they have a good story for the 2 guards at Narda. And I did laugh because Roran's cover is that he's a potter. Everyone has like a really good story, and then Roran's just like, pottery. I love pottery. It's amazing.
Yes, and you take one look in his crazy eyes and you're like, you're really crazy about pottery.
Yeah, Horst gets all mad because he's like, dude, that's a horrible cover.
Yes.
And I have to say, Horst and his family seem just like solid. Every time we get anything from them, they're always the voice of reason.
Yes.
They notice a bulletin board once they get into Narda.
Yeah.
Classic D&D style with bounties and everything.
Yeah.
And what we see on it is not good. Roran is on that bulletin board.
Ooh.
But he's lucky he grew his beard while he was in the spine.
Yes.
Because it covers his
He's
face.
unrecognizable. Well, also he would have been on the billboard before he morphed into Crazy Eyes Garrow. So
it's true. It's getting more Garrow-like.
Yeah.
But he is shocked. And first, the Rozek now have his image all the way through the Empire. He's a little shocked about that.
Yeah, that's bad.
But he also, like, his like, Kelptor was really be after me, which puts him on his back foot. He's like, I'm worth 10 1,000 gold. And he laughs because he's kind of like, nice, I'm worth a bit. Yeah.
God, nothing like the self-esteem that comes from the price on your head.
Yeah, and then there's Aragon, and there's a poster right next to Roran.
Yeah.
It looks older, and Galbatorix says he will give someone an earldom if they can capture Aragon.
That's crazy.
But that he is very, very dangerous.
Yeah.
And this confuses Roran.
Yeah, Roran's like, my brother cousin?
Yeah, and the villagers, and it's just, they're like, wait, what?
He's not dangerous or important. He just ran away like a little bitch a few months ago, I think is what they're thinking.
He's the bean farmer.
Yes.
Yeah, so they split up and go off to get what they need. Roran, Horse, and Badar look like to get the villagers a boat so they can get to Tirm by the ocean. And they're looking for a vessel that can hold 300 villagers. That's how many we have.
Villagers.
It's too many. And it's a bad time because it's between because it's between seasons. The only real option is barges, and they're directed to Clovis, the captain of the barges.
The names, so good.
Clovis is good.
Yes.
Clovis says it's a bad time to launch them due to the weather and all that, and that his men are off doing other seasonal work, so he'd have to find replacements. He's just like, well, I couldn't do it. Yeah. But Roran says they can get him extra hands, no worries, and like, how much is this going to cost? And Clovis tells them that and they start haggling. They start like, it's kind of fun to see this thing. I like this part.
Yeah.
Clovis is picking up something weird here.
Yes. He's like, well, what you need the barges for at this off time? And why are you willing to pay whatever for that? Like, I don't like it.
Yeah. And Roran's just being all stoic here and reveals nothing.
Yeah. Roran's insane.
Yeah.
Clovis must have very bad vibes.
Oh my God. Roran, if you were reading this from the other position, Roran would seem like a crazy person.
Absolutely.
Clovis asks if they're transporting, and Roran tells him livestock, which is really funny to me.
A bit much Roran.
Yeah. Roran starts to think that like Clovis is scared of him. And like right when he thinks like Clovis is going to like run away, Clovis is like, okay, I'll agree, but I need your name. And obviously Roran says, Stronghammer. So
too much, dude.
Dope.
Oh
so
my God.
Dope.
This guy.
Yeah, the villagers are like, Roran are like, how the heck can we afford this? We can't pay the fees. And Roran's like, we're gonna steal it once we're on the other side.
So bad.
And no one wants to do that.
Yeah, they're like, we're gonna pay him a small deposit, and then he's gonna drop us off, and we're just gonna run away, all 300 of us, and that can't end badly for anybody.
And Horse is like, this is like cheating an honest man's work. I don't like this.
Yes.
And Roran is just like, we're doing it. It's like crazy.
He's like, we have no option.
When they get back, the villagers are really not enthused with the barge cruise idea.
Yeah.
Loring says, barges? We don't want no stinking barges.
I know, it is funny. That's a direct quote.
Yes, and it has to be a reference to the we don't need no stinking badges from the 1948 film The Treasure of Sierra Madre. It's gotta be.
Couldn't be anything else.
Just what a weird reference in this book. I was like, that's okay. So to sum up, the villagers are mad, people are freaking out, and the chapter ends with Roran letting them like tire themselves out, and then he just stands up and he says, it's this or walk.
Yep.
And then he just walks away.
That's our boy.
Yeah,
I mean, you remember the banging the torch in the middle of town, just screaming, come?
Yes. He has a way with words.
He really does. That takes us to chapter 45, The Hammer Falls.
Yeah.
That's just our Roran there.
Yeah,
Classic
so cool.
Roran. This chapter starts with him waking to take his watch that night. His spidey senses kind of start tingling in the wee hours, and when a massive shadow rises from a hillside in the distance, just like a smudge of blackness in the blacker night kind of a vibe. So cool. He knows what it is when he sees it. It's one of the Leatherblocka.
I love that name, by the way. Leatherblocka.
So good.
Sounds creepy.
And it screams into the night, terrifying everything in the forest, all the people, all the animals. Roran hurries back to warn the camp, but the farm animals that they have with them are in a tizzy. So all of them are able to be calmed by the villagers. They're like sneaking around. They're really trying not to be seen from above, essentially.
Gotcha.
So they're trying to be quiet and like stealthy. And some of the men go and calm all the farm animals except for one donkey that will not shut the fuck up.
Oh, what an ass.
Exactly. Well, don't worry. Roran kills it, so
Got what he deserved.
was an ass. They think the animals have given them away when the creature seems to be coming closer, but they're saved at the last minute by a stampeding herd of deer. So like they basically get trampled by deer in the forest, but they're like, thank God for those trampling deer, because the deer run through and the Leatherblocka follows them, which is
Okay.
ideal.
Yes, that's what you want.
Yes. The next day, the villagers are sufficiently terrified terrified from that experience into getting on board with the plan to take the barges. Roran and a small group head to Narda to pay Clovis their deposit. They make their final arrangements to leave at dawn the following day, and Clovis says he needs 4 villagers to be deckhands and 9 more to act as guards. And Roran's like, yeah, cool. I got guys for days.
He's like, I got just the amount you need.
Yes. And he tells Clovis that they'll be meeting the livestock to load them in a nearby cove after they launch the next morning. Clovis is suspicious about how many people are with Roran. So by now he's seen in back-to-back days 2 different crews that Roran takes into town with him.
Yeah.
And then he says that they have 13 more villagers to act as the guardsmen and
Clovis is like,
deckhands.
this seems fishy.
He thinks it seems fishy, but he is smart enough not to mention it to Roran because Roran seems crazy and threatening. And they spend the rest of the day, the villagers who came to town with Roran on this excursion spend the rest of the day loading their dry cargo into the barges. So after the villagers prep to leave in camp that night, they separate, with Roran leaving 12 different, again, men to meet the barges in Narda at dawn. And Horst leads the rest of the village to wait in the cove to load up the livestock.
Okay.
And on their way into town the next morning, Roran is recognized by one of the guards, unfortunately. So his like swapping out the 12 men all the time plan is not going well. As soon as they have just like a couple lines of exchange, it's clear to Roran he's not going to be able to talk his way free. This guy's like, you look like that guy on the poster.
Yeah.
And we're not about that. And Roran just murders the 2 guards right away.
Nice.
Indiscriminately. Nobody in town, he like looks around being like, anybody here? Anybody see that?
Yeah, he's so fast.
Yes, nobody sees, but they do have to hide the bodies and beat feet to the dock after that to make sure that they can actually get out of town. So they make it over to Clovis without incident, but Roran's jumpy as fuck, naturally, and ready to get got. He almost murders Clovis when the captain just grabs his arm to compliment him on his leadership style. Very jumpy. And just as they make it halfway to the cove with the waiting villagers, they hear the alarm being raised in the receding town.
Yeah.
And Clovis and his men are kind of like, hey, I wonder what's going on in town.
Should we check it out?
That sounds kind of weird. We like can't see it quite yet, but it seems like something's up in there. Maybe we should turn around.
What is it?
And Roran's just sitting there like shaking, white knuckling his hammer,
holding his
being
hammer.
Like, don't fucking turn
Don't
around.
do it.
He's like, basically, I'll kill you, Clovis, if you turn these barges around. And Clovis is like, nah, we got places to be. And one of the men's like, well, I'd give a day's wages to know what's happening over there, which I like. So they round the peninsula to see a cove full of refugees, and Clovis is understandably pissed to be trafficking people over to Tyrm.
He's like, no way, man. This is not what I do.
Yes, Roran tries to skate on the technicality of the word livestock, but then he just decides to threaten to kill Clovis if he doesn't follow through on their bargain.
Yeah.
Clovis tries very briefly to attack Roran, and Roran's too quick to block with his shield, and threatens again to toss Clovis aside and commandeer the barges anyway. He's like, it doesn't matter. I don't really want to kill you, but I will leave you on the beach and just steal your shit.
Yeah.
Which is the only way you know how to make money.
And he's basically like, there's like a lot of us. So
yes,
if it's not me, it's going to be one of these people now. So.
Yeah, exactly. And Clovis, he's like, you agreed to do this. Like, we're not dangerous, kind of, but we will maybe murder you.
Wipes the blood off his hammer.
Yes.
We're not dangerous.
It's fine. He's like, just do what we agreed to. And so Clovis agrees to this tentatively, but only if Roran spills the tea on like what the fuck is going on here.
Yeah.
Clovis is like, I deserve some answers. And I actually think Clovis is a really good guy. After Roran kind of explains to him like what's happening, he does agree to go through with it. He's like, I'm no fan of the Empire. And for Clovis too, he says that he needs these answers from Roran because even under the threat of death to like carry on this job, he won't do it if it's against his principles.
Yeah.
So I kind of like that.
Clovis is the man.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah.
So Roran's explanation is that the Empire attacked the village like apropos of nothing, which kind of true. And he said Serta's their only choice to escape the Imperial forces. He leaves out everything about the Razak.
I think that's smart, actually.
Yes, I think so too. And Clovis is like, yeah, fuck it. I'm not a fan of the Empire, I guess. Just like, don't be a dick anymore if you can help it. So the cargo, animals, and people are loaded on nearly without incident, and the chapter and this episode's summaries close on the 3 barges hoisting sails to get out on the open sea to Tyrm, floating gently into the tranquil embrace of the ocean, Dane. I bet nothing bad ever happens to them again, right?
I bet they're in Serta within the hour.
I think so.
Yeah.
Well, they're going to Tyrm.
Oh, I bet they're within Tyrm. Easy peasy.
15 minutes to Tyrm. Hour to Serta.
Yeah. We'll just come back and they'll be like, well, we're all relaxing in Serta.
Yes, exactly. Okay, I have a confession to make, Dane.
All right.
A podcast first here.
Okay. Oh no, I'm scared.
I know. Okay. I'm going to put a pin in the analysis section this week.
Oh, okay.
I read and reread this section until I could read this children's book no longer. Okay. And I was looking for a theme, obviously, so that I could do my job and write the analysis.
Yeah.
And there isn't one.
Oh.
Well, okay, there are themes. There's always
long arching themes, I think you're saying. Like the book has a theme.
The book, of course, has a theme. I think for me, with this collection of chapters, like we do have both Eragon and Roran bumping up against like morality, the nature of good and evil here. And it's evolving into something that's a definite gray area for both of the brother cousins, but it feels to me like it's all like right there in the text.
Yeah, they're talking about it.
Yes, Eragon and Ormus are literally ruminating on like what it means to be evil in the book.
Yeah.
The climax of his plot line with the Faïrth isn't really connected to this idea at all to me. So I'm like, well, the most like tension-filled thing that happens is just not a part of this.
Yeah.
And for Roran, again, for him being so introspective, we get his explicit thought process around killing the soldiers being a means to an end, and like what he's willing to do as far as like doing a fraud to Clovis, just doing a light fraud.
Yeah.
And there isn't really a ton here that's like deeper than that, I think, for me.
Okay.
And I know also read your notes, know you got a chunky deep dive lined up for this week. So I was like, I don't know. I don't feel like I need to make a meal of something that's like pretty cut and dried. Both Eragon and Roran are working through what it means to be good, what it means to be evil.
Yeah. And I like the idea that like we're not going to force a segment if we don't think the segment's warranted. I think that's a good thing. We're not just going to make stuff up.
Yeah.
We're going to be motivated to do something, right?
That's the dream. So anyway, no analysis section this week. I'm off the hook. I'm going to sit back, relax, let you get to your deep dive.
A deep dive. Deep dive. I will say this week I do have a chunky one about Nasawada, and she wasn't even in this section. So we're getting to the point of the book where I have to start doing deep dives about other stuff in other like episodes.
Yes, just because you want to get through all your like favorite topics.
Yeah.
And I definitely agree. I think Naswada is really important to go over.
Yeah. She's an important player in the world of politics of Algasia.
She's one of my favorite characters to read right now. So I'm like, yes, please tell me everything we are supposed to know about Naswada right now.
Okay. So let's do a quick recap on Nasawada.
Okay.
Yeah. First, we know Nasawada is the only relative and daughter of Ajahad, who was the previous leader of the Varden when Eragon got to Trondheim in the mountain of Farthendur in the Bior Mountains in Book 1. Okay. Briefly, we got to go over Ajahad, and it will tell us some things about Nasawada. Okay.
Hey, you don't have to explain to me why we have to go over Ajahad, Dane. I'm happy to go over Ajahad.
Well, then you'll enjoy this section.
Yes.
Ajahad was like, for context, he's the father figure, right? He's Nasawada's actual father.
Yes.
So this is the person who raised.
He's not just our daddy.
Yes.
Our Varden daddy. He's her actual daddy.
True. So he raised and molded her. So let's go over him real quick. All right. So Ajahad was very important in Algasia.
Yes.
We know that he was like an otherworldly soldier due to the hinted at clash with Durza, whose sword had a scratch line down it from his clash with Ajahad.
Yes.
So Ajahad seems to know and have also befriended Brahm, the dragon rider and original leader of the Varden.
Yes. Also, I think just the fact that he survived a fight with Durza is enough to be like, he was the best fighter.
Best fighter. Also knew Brahm. maybe they worked together on fighting. I don't know, but they definitely knew each other.
Yes.
We know that he had an extremely well-loved and political, like, savvy career. And he was, like, presumably well-loved as he was elected by the Vard to be the leader of the Varden by the Council of Elders.
Oh, yeah.
And led the Varden in their, like, Cold War, if you will, with the Empire. And we know that Ajahad was extremely well-liked by the dwarves as well, as we saw at the beginning of this book in Eldest, when he was given special funeral rites by the dwarves. Finally, we know what he looks like. He was a good-looking dude, and we knew his personality.
Yes.
He seemed like a
Idris Elba on both counts, I think.
Yes.
Looks and personality.
Looks and personality, very Idris Elba.
Yeah.
He seems like a kind and generous but serious and direct man. He had great military like tactics and political acumen. He was also the first character in Aragon so far, in Aragon or in Eldest, to have black skin.
Yes.
So this created this instant mystery and frankly really interesting detail to him that set him apart from the other humans so far in the story.
Yes.
And I was always so interested in what that might mean when I was a kid. Like, is there another country or group of people we haven't heard about? Is there a region in Algasia where like that we should know about?
Yeah.
Are there lots of characters in the story that are black, but they're just not described as such, or it's so common it's not worth mentioning? Like, what is Christopher Paolini telling us? So later on in Aragon, we also meet Nasawada, and she, like her father, is also black-skinned. And again, there's really no information on this when we meet these characters, and they were not the main characters in Aragon, so we both skipped over this last season. But that being said, we are learning a lot about Nasawada, and this different skin color seems to hint at some new and different group or people in Alagasia, or at the very least a region in Alagasia that we were going to learn about, but we still don't know where they came from or anything about their cultural backgrounds. And it's something that it's going to come up in later books, I will say that, and we're definitely going to talk about it. But so far, we don't have any knowledge. So I'm going to again gloss over that so that like let's talk about her specifically, but I did want to mention it so we weren't like completely ignoring it. You know what I mean?
And the only thing we really saw, other than like Christopher Paolini went out of his way to mention it, I think, like you said, the only other thing we saw was Neswata's like personal funeral rite she seemed to be performing, like her wail and her song at her dad's funeral, and we just have zero information about that other than like, I would very much like to know what that was about. I want to know more about these people in any way, shape, or form.
Because they sound cool.
They're both very cool.
Yeah. I don't know. So let's talk about what we know about Nasawada.
Yeah.
Nasawada was raised and grew up with her father in Trondheim. She was very familiar with the dwarves in the Varden, but notably seems like she might be less familiar with the people and geography of the Empire.
Yeah.
I don't think she's seen much of it, as she's always been hidden inside that mountain. We know that she has some ability to fight and is a brave and principled. In the first book, Aragon, she defied Ajahad, orders to flee with the women and children, and instead disguised herself as a man and fought.
Classic Mulan.
Yeah, she did in the Battle of Trondheim. We can also infer that she doesn't scare easily or become intimidated easily. It's also noted that Ajahad like became enraged in that book, like in Eldest, the beginning of it, and she just was like, okay, she took it with alacrity.
Yeah, she's great.
From the start, and I mean the first book, Aragon, we also get signs that Nasawada is at least as political savvy as Ajahad, if not more political savvy.
I think we're seeing that here too.
Yeah, and Nasawada intentionally, remember she came up in that book to see Aragon, essentially for like the innocuous reason to like deliver a message. And it was like she just knew she needed to meet him.
Yes.
And then from that same meeting in that book, we learned that she was spending time with Murtagh. Yes. And now, while that might actually be like romantically motivated, which and attraction based, as they both imply in that book a little bit,
I definitely ship that.
I actually think the initial meeting is probably similar to the initial meeting with Aragon. Remember, Murtagh's an important player, and he might be a prisoner then, but it was like never going to stay that way.
Yeah.
And Murtagh's an important person in Galbator's government. He's the son of Morzan. He's a friend of the new dragon rider, Aragon. I think rather than relationship motivated or romance motivated, I bet it was probably political savvy there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that's what I thought I should put this out there. And like, she was like, people should know me. I should know people. I'm going to learn about them. I'm going to start my relationships. I think this speaks to proactive side to Nasawada, as well as the political-minded side.
Yeah.
So she's always thinking ahead, always thinking to what's most advantageous to her and, I guess, her people, right? To further this idea, let's go back to the beginning of the book, Eldest, when she tells Aragon that Ajahad and her were working together to make sure the Council of Elders would only pick Nasawada. And it implies to me that Ajahad was working intentionally with his daughter. We get this in the first book a little bit, too.
Yeah.
And they were both, like, strategizing together. So, like, I'm thinking, like, Orik mentioned that again, like I said in the first book, and I'm thinking that Ajahad trusted his daughter enough to like bounce ideas off of her the whole time.
Okay.
And wanted her to be the leader of the Varden because he believed in her. And I think from what we get from Ajahad, I don't think he would do that of just like because it's his daughter.
Yeah.
We didn't get a lot of him, but I feel like he molded and trained her to like be this person.
Well, and I mean, I definitely read too much into Ajahad, but we definitely get the idea that he was somebody who like very much understood the risks of his position and the world. So I think the kind of the opposite of that is true too. It's not just that he really believed Naswada would make a good leader for the Varden. I think he would have been rightly concerned about wanting his only child to take on that position.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like knowing how dangerous it is.
Yeah.
And so I think that means he really thought she'd be perfect for the job. If he's like, I would like to risk her life, I think that'd be a good idea. He just did not seem like that kind of guy.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it's probably a little bit of both, to be honest. Well, at the beginning of this book, Naswada knows exactly how to handle the Council of Elders and how to manipulate them. I think she does play a little demure. I think I mentioned it in the thing. But when she plays instantly strong when she needs to play strong.
Yeah.
And she controls her emotions. We see this over and over and over again.
Absolutely, yeah.
Even in these POVs. And even the ones even the way she treats Aragon when she mentions Murtagh after her father dies, she just is very thoughtful, emotionally controlled.
Yes.
So Nasawada is also able to use that political moment of her dad dying and her coronation to make some military changes that would be really unlikely to fail strategically because she used it as an advantageous time.
Yes,
She decided to do that right after the funeral, right after the coronation, and like tell the people of the Varden while they're all amped up, we're marching to war, and no one's going to tell the newly like fatherless queen or whatever, president or prime minister.
Queen president.
Yeah, queen president, queen president minister,
Yes.
that like she like can't do that, right?
Yes.
So what a great time to do that. It's very unlikely that in that moment, like I said, anything's going to change with that.
Yeah.
Next, let's talk about King Oren. It sounds like the King of Serta is a man that you need to try to, be delicate with like kids' gloves.
Yes.
And I like to...
Well, especially protective kids' gloves because that lab is dangerous.
It's very dangerous.
There's shit exploding in there and just like loose mercury.
Yeah. I like him to this point. I mean, I guess he seems like a kind of guy you could have a beer with maybe. He reminds me a little bit of like a George Bush kind of guy. Like he seems like fun to hang out with, but also like he's problematic.
But who's Dick Cheney?
I think Nasawada. So Nasawada.
Hot take.
I know.
I love her. That's very rude.
Well, she's like
I bet she never shot someone on accident.
I bet Nasawada. Oh my gosh. Are we saying Nasawada's as like competent as Dick Cheney, but just not evil?
Okay.
Nasawada and move on. Quickly. Nasawada handles him quite well. And even in her like internal dialogue, we can see the political thinking and strategy taking place.
Okay.
She thinks about him being attractive and possibly them hooking up, not for fun or love, but because it would benefit the Varden.
Yes.
She also shows that she is like a true believer and like selfless woman because I think she's like serious about possibly doing that if that's necessary.
Yes. Like I think she thinks about her life in all the ways that it could benefit the Varden, and that includes an advantageous marriage if she needs to do something like that politically.
Totally. I totally agree. She also, it's funny, she's incredibly intelligent and creative, and the breakdown of the thinking to like get to selling lace from her meeting with King Oren, it really shows that when she's presented with a problem, she reaches out to get the support, but when that doesn't work, she doesn't resort to violence or intimidation like Roran, or have the option like Aragon to use magic.
Yes.
So she uses her mind. That's really what we're seeing here. She calls in like a person who can do what she's thinking and asks a question.
Yeah.
And even the way Triana, the leader of Duvringer Garda, and her talk this out in the tent is fascinating. Nasawada is not to be messed with. She understands that she cannot overwhelm Triana like powerfully. Like Triana is herself magical.
Yes.
It poses an actual violent threat to Nasawada if it became a power struggle.
Yes, and it, like so much that Neswata is dealing with, it's a really tenuous balance with Duvren Gargada because Neswata needs them. She cannot fight this war without magicians and magic spies. She'll be absolutely fucked. Triana understands this, of course. Like, they both have their power in this situation, but the way I think Neswata is able to finesse her way through and bring Triana to heel in a way that, like, Triana's not thrilled about, but, like, she does not leave the meeting in a way that, like, at least I interpret it as like, Neswata better watch her back. That lady's about to, like,
and I think it's
double cross her. You know what I mean?
Well, no, I think it's because Neswata makes it, she is such a threat intellectually. Yeah. And she uses the power she does have, which is the Varden. And I think she like basically politically traps Triana. Yes. And Triana knows it. And they both know it. She's like honest about it almost. You know what I mean? And then finally we have Elva. Naswata jumps at the chance to use this poor girl as well as keeping her under Angela's control. It's smart. It's pragmatic. It hints at like a win at all costs sort of mindset. Yeah. But there is no doubt Nasawada will use any tool at hand. She's not going to waste the weird kid, right?
No, it's a little dicey, but I think, like I said, I think it really, in the episode where this played into the analysis, I think it really says a lot about what her values are and what kind of the priority level of each value is. And pragmatism is high, dude.
Yeah, seriously. And I know like this deep dive has really been more of a review of her history and abilities and putting all the information, but I want to put it in like top of mind because like this really has been spread out over the story so far.
Yes.
And like we don't get as many POVs as Roran and Aragon with her in this book. And she's extremely important, obviously, to the entire story. And unlike some of the other rulers, she seems to be a major mover and shaker who's pushing everything forward. She's pushing Serta into the war. Yes. She's pushing the dwarfs in the war. She's pushing Aragon into the war.
She's pushing the elves into the war.
Yeah, it's just everybody.
With a note, dude. Like,
yeah, just one letter, essentially.
Yeah.
So I like how I wanted to go over her background and like I just want to go over like even how she handles Aragon himself.
Yes.
Along with everything else. It's just really well done. So
yeah, I think that's a really good point about how spread out her story is. It's not something I really think about much because I like her so much as a character, but it can be really easy, I think, to lose track of some of those what feel maybe a little bit like dropped threads with the amount of time and the amount of action, frankly, that like is happening to Roran and Aragon in between, you know?
And like if you're a reader like us who's reread a bunch of times, I think it's like always, it's already in your head.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But if this is your first read through with us, I do think you probably didn't like think of that all together or put it into context at all.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Plus, again, I'm happy for any excuse to hang out with Neswata. She's the best.
Yeah, there's nothing to hate there.
No.
Which leads us to what do the haters say?
Hey.
Actually, you should do your research, Have you even read the book? How you pronounce it?
What are the haters saying?
There is an index in the back, right?
This is a really derivative.
While we're talking about one of our new POV characters, Nasawada, that we get in this book, it is the perfect time to do a hater segment on Roran.
Oh, good.
Yeah. The haters out there dislike
Nothing
Roran.
to hate about that crazy guy.
Yeah, they don't like him. They hate him for a lot of reasons, but most of them are, I'm not gonna lie, they're pretty lame.
Okay.
For instance, the fact that Roran is good at killing. You know, so far, Rowan has killed a bunch of soldiers, too, in this section.
Yeah.
And last time we left off, he fought 6 soldiers in a Razak, right? So how is it possible? Grumble, grumble, grumble. You know, it's a work of fiction. There's flying dragons. There's talking cats. There's a king who has lived for hundreds of years with boogeyman henchmen.
Yeah.
That's the setting. It's as unrealistic as stormtroopers like missing Han Solo, Leia, and Luke when they're like surrounded on all sides in Star Wars.
Yeah.
Or as unrealistic as Vin Diesel dragging a Volt through a city during a chase scene in the Fast and Furious movies. Or as unrealistic as Eddie Dean in The Dark Tower being an instantly good gunslinger.
Yeah.
Or Logan Ninefingers in The Blade itself fighting off 6v1 and winning without dying.
Yeah.
Or basically any other work of fiction where the talents of the main characters make little to no sense.
They're there, Dane.
Yeah, I'm just like, the reason is, here it is, guys. Haters, come close. The reason is he's a main character in a fantasy story. And he's the main character in a fantasy story because he's fantastical and extremely awesome. Otherwise, he would die in the first paragraph and his conflict would just end.
Yes.
That's it.
That's it.
So it's lame.
It's pretty easy.
Stop being lame.
Yep.
Anyway, that being said, let's talk about Roran.
You just want to talk about what you love about Roran.
I do.
Okay, great. But that is real. The haters hate him.
Oh, they do.
Okay.
They really, really hate him. Roran has a lot of qualities that make for a good soldier, or at least a very like good bruiser right off the bat.
Okay.
He's worked as a farmer and been helping blacksmith over the last couple of months.
Yes.
When he's like not doing that, he's a capable woodsman. He has the strength and skill to use a bow, which is an incredibly like you need to be very strong to do that. It's very difficult. He grew up regularly walking 20 miles round trip
Oh, we know, Dane.
from his house and the closest town.
I think you've mentioned it once or twice.
I think a few times. He's strong, he's fit, he's good with ranged weapons. He is used to being like pushed harder than most like guards or patrol dudes in this world.
Yeah, does anyone remember Garrow, who famously was not chill about anything?
I know. And like beyond that, Roran's intelligent. This is clear. And this is not for every character, by the way. Aragon is not, as I don't think, as intelligent as Roran. Roran can use his mind. Roran's devoted to his one true love, Katrina, and to his community of Carvajal.
Yeah.
He's driven and single-minded in his focus to protect her and his people.
That's true.
Roran is almost supernaturally focused on this and hardworking. And the way that he is described as he's setting the defenses of Carvajal show that there's an insane attention to detail. He's like got quick thinking. He's like good with people.
Yeah.
He's a natural leader.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Kind of insane, maybe a little unhinged, a little
unhinged.
scary,
Yeah.
but he'll get some shit done, I think.
Yeah. And I think all these make Roran someone who would probably shouldn't be able, maybe he shouldn't be able to push back 6 soldiers naked, but certainly, certainly he could surprise 2 guys at a gate and kill them before they knew he was going to attack.
Yeah, after all the practice he's had at that point, sure.
Yeah, and also, haters, what about these Imperial soldiers you're trying to defend? It sounds like these soldiers who work for the Empire live in a pretty brutal monarchy without much rebellion.
That's true.
From Murtek's story in the first book, where Galbatorix wanted him to burn down an entire village.
Ooh, yeah, that's true.
It seems like there isn't much fighting with the local population, and when there is, it's just slaughter.
Yeah.
So how much experience in actual battle do these soldiers even have? There have been no major wars in over 100 years, and how many of these soldiers have even killed a person? Like, none of these soldiers alive have been in any great conflicts. By the time Roran had gotten to Narda, he'd probably seen more action than most of the soldiers that he has fought to this point.
Yes.
Isn't that something? Like, it's not skills in arm, but doesn't that make him dangerous?
Yeah, we'll never forget, at least for not so much for the 2 guards gate people in Narda, but remember, those aren't necessarily soldiers. They're just guards.
Guards,
yeah,
guys,
they're
yeah.
rent-a-cops. But for...
Oh no.
They're just guards. But for the soldiers who attack Carvajal, by the time Roran drops 6 of them by himself, if this is the point of contention for the haters, think how low those soldiers' morale would have been by the time they snuck in the gate. They've been beaten back from the walls multiple times by a group of pitchfork-wielding villagers.
Right.
They've been ambushed out of their tents in the night, and their bosses are the fucking Rozak. Like, those guys hate their lives. They're probably not fighting with the gusto of, like...
Well, even what you're saying, they're trying to capture these people in the bed at night, and then the naked guy just, like, fights off the
wilds
Rozak.
out, yeah.
It might be surprising enough for him to, like, do some damage. So
I would believe it, yeah.
I don't know. Roran also has something most of these soldiers don't. Everything is at stake for Roran.
Yeah.
This is like a superhero-like thing in conflicts. His home is gone, but everyone he has known is continuing on, and they depend on him.
Yeah.
If he starts tomorrow, he really believes they'll die, I think.
Yeah.
So his motivation is simply greater than most people knows. Like, this is the whole, like, burn the boats behind us thing. This is like a real thing. So I'm not really impressed with the hate for Roran being a bad character because he's too good at battle too quick. But he's essentially the quintessential folk hero. He's a farmer turned fighter. This is fine. It's just as believable as anything else in the story. And so haters, this week, I say, poor argument. Okay.
They have better points.
Yeah, sure. Roran has never been trained, but so far he hasn't been in any duels that I've seen.
That's true.
And he's been attacking in chaotic battles, surprising people when they don't know it's a fight, or like has a lot of reasons both physically and mentally to be a very dangerous man.
I could see that.
And so back off, Roran, all right? I won't have it. I love you guys, but also we have a love-hate relationship, okay? That's what what do the haters say? You're a hater.
Yes, we're really milking that love-hate tension.
Yes.
For what are the haters saying? Well, Dane, do you have some final thoughts on this episode, these chapters, before we call it?
You know, I like pirates. That was kind of fun.
Well, I feel like we're just at the start of our pirate journey. I'm not gonna lie. I can't believe we're gonna have to wait, I think, like 2 whole episodes
Oh, really?
at the pace we're reading, yes, before we get to be pirates.
Oh,
I'm
really?
a little pissed about it.
Are you serious?
Yeah, that's rude.
Okay, I thought like stealing a barge counts.
Oh, well, they didn't steal it.
They just
Clovis-
threatened death to commandeer it with their people. You're right.
Well, they didn't commandeer it. He agreed to take them. They're right now. He thinks they're paying him.
Wasn't there a threat at the end? Like, you can let me go and you can go with us, or I could kill you and take it.
Yeah, sure. But he was like, I still need to know why you're going. I'm not doing shit. And if I agree, then I just agree.
Yeah.
And I'll just like be your paid captain.
Yeah. That's fair. It seems a little bit like anyone like in that situation would say a similar thing. Like, oh yeah, no, I would. That's what I would say. I don't like the Empire either, man. That's fine. I don't really know if we can know if Clovis is like. Clovis, oh, dude, no worry. Like, don't. I mean, you threatened me several times, and you lied to me and tricked me, and you're probably gonna rob me. But this, I'm with you on this.
To be honest, he does not seem as mad at Roran as he should, and that's a real feature in this writing because I read it several times trying to find a theme, and I was like, Clovis is too chill about this. I don't know if it's being written as a bad thing that Roran's done here.
Yeah, I would say
it's a little confusing.
It's a little confusing. The only thing I would say here is, I really like Roran's story here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm starting to get a little fatigue in this section of the book of Aragon's like constant training. I love Ormus. I love everything like on its own.
What about Vanir?
I know I like Vanir. I like all, like, so I'm saying it's kind of weird. Like, I like it all, but it's also like, haven't we been doing this since like chapter 6 of book 1? There is a little bit of repetitiveness here. This isn't a criticism. I still love this series. There is a little bit of me that's like, okay, we could let's change it up a little bit. Like, we went to a new place, we traveled, and now we're learning again. At least with Roran's story, there's like it's a new perspective, and it seems, since it's a guy who has no magic, no dragon, he's not superhuman.
Yeah.
He has no power. You know what I mean? There's something fun and gritty about that. So when we leave, sometimes I'm feeling a bit like, man, I wish we could go back. Like, just a little bit. Like, I love Aragon too.
I guess some of the pacing of it for me is kind of it feels like it's due to the breakup of the point of view chapters. I don't know that we've really been in Ellesmere as long as maybe it feels like we have, because we've started getting more of Roran and also Neswata since we made it to the Elven City. You know?
That's a fair response.
I think there's more breaks in the action for Aragon. And then 2, it's all... I think the training portion of it is a lot of world building just because of how much we notice or we learn from Oramus.
Yeah.
So I think, of course, world building can feel kind of slow sometimes, especially when it's juxtaposed against something that's very action packed, like Roran's story.
It seems
a lot of
immediate.
blood, a lot of fighting. Yes, a lot of tension, a lot of stakes for Roran that there aren't necessarily for Aragon. His biggest stake right now is to like get himself to a better nerve specialist and figure out his seizure disorder. But we have some iconic stuff coming up for Aragon in the next episode, so I think you're going to be okay. I think you're going to feel like his training has been leading to something.
Yeah, I want to go back to that, but I think we're done. Unless you'd like to focus on this episode and make us a Faïrth or something.
I don't think I'll be looking at this Faïrth-agraph.
All right, well then that's it for this week. Thank you for listening. That's it for this episode. Make sure to rate and review, especially on Apple Podcast. Support on Patreon, and check out our social media at Is This Just Fantasy Pod on TikTok or at Just Fantasy Pod on Instagram and Twitter. If you have any questions or just want to write us about the podcast, we'd love to hear from you, and you can email us at isthisjustfantasypod@gmail.com.
Yes, and if you want to keep pace and read along with us, on the next episode, we will be covering chapter 46, The Beginning of Wisdom, through chapter 49, In a Starry Glade. We've almost made it 50 chapters, Dane.
Almost done it.
But not yet. Not next episode.
We'll be done.
And we love our fantasy. Come on and listen to us next time. Find out what our deep dive will be. Thanks for catching our show.